Hey all, welcome to Circle of Tone, and today it's the damned Goth Broth. This is episode 3. Check out my old videos for Susie and the Banshees and also The Cure. But I know this era isn't technically their gothic period, it's more of their punk. You know, we talk about things like New York Dolls, The Stooges as being, the original punk, but the scene officially started with one single, and that is The Damned. New Rose isn't about a girl. It's not a love story. It's actually about the scene. New Rose is about the punk scene that started back in the was it mid late 70s. This single was before the Sex Pistols even got a deal, I think. I'm not covering exactly the gothic period, but David Vanian went on, and the Damned's music went on to be a huge staple in the gothic music scene. Eloise, it's basically the bat out of hell for goths. It's the anthem. A lot of goths lost their virginity to that song, trust me. Let's get to the gear. So I'm going to zoom in on the Brian James era, but I'll go on to the latter stuff as well with, Captain Sensible and the rest of it. Speaking of Captain Sensible, the thing that he said, the sound, the guitar of the Damned, there's only one guitar, one official guitar, and that is the Gibson SG. And that's what I use. I use my own pickups on there. And I did get, if you listen to the beginning of New Rose, it's so blown out and aggressive and gnarly sounding. So I'm like, what amp is that? I could not place the amp. So I did a lot of research. I mean, a lot. And all information points to it being a high watt amp. And what's in those big Baltic birch high watt cabs with the bracing, and they had ports on the bottom of some of them. They actually had Fane speakers in there. So for this, I actually tracked down some Fane speakers. And hard to get, I'm in Florida. You try getting Fane speakers in America, from back in the day. I think they called Pop 50 speakers, and they were a huge deal back then because they were 50 watt speakers. Remember, the old Celestians were 20, 25 watt. And if you're pushing it in the 70s, 30 watts with the blackbacks. Blackback 30 watts, probably my favorite all-time speaker. And these Fane speakers remind me of blackbacks, but a little bit warmer. I tried and tried. I couldn't crack the tone, and I realized I'm using my bridge pickup. Okay, so it was too tight, even with the Fane and a British style amplifier, because I can't get a high watt. So I was like, I was struggling, and then I realized at the time in the 70s, people who used SGs, say Iommi, he'd actually play rhythm on the neck pickup. So I thought, I bet you either use the neck pickup or the middle pickup on this song. So I flipped it to the neck and boom, in it came. If you like the tone, it's my own neck pickup that you're hearing in the rhythm. The bridge pickup was too tight, and the neck pickup got me all of that oomph, the balls, and I loved it. I really like my version. I think listening critically, my version has a bit more gain. I couldn't get that crispy top end without pushing the gain a little bit, and as it happens, if you can see this guy, I use this to help me get a little bit of the vintage vibe, because this basically emulates an old EMI console that they would use back in the day, the Beatles console. This really helped me as well. So I used this pedal with the guitar in front of the amp, and I had the amp as basically a bass for regular tone, and I blew it out and then further made it go farty with the neck pickup. So that's how I got the sound. And if you want to see pictures of what mics I used an old Unidyne. It's like the precursor to the SM57. I made and used that microphone. And I also had a large condenser mic in there as well to get a lot of the detail. Now here's one thing, right? Everybody's Brian when it comes to guitars. Captain Sensible plays guitar generally now for the Damned. But that Brian era was the magical time for riffs. After that, the Damned started getting really eclectic, which I also liked, but it wasn't guitar-based anymore. But Captain Sensible on the bass, he should go back to bass, man. He had something. There's something about that man on bass. The riffs, the digging in, because he's got so much to put out there. I think with the guitar, he hasn't really grabbed me. His songwriting is amazing on the guitar, and with his tone, I was never that blown away. But on the bass, I believe he was using high watt amps as well. All live pictures of the mid to late 70s, I see him playing through high watt amps as well. So I put my bass through the same amp that I recorded the guitars with. And I don't think I had the this pedal on there much, just nudging it in the EQ a little bit. But on the guitars, I had the high pass filter on, all sorts of stuff. So nothing really that is easy to create, but I got there in the end. Sound City in the 70s interests me just from a historical point of view, because I believe they were more geared towards sound reinforcement. And the Pathway Studios, which was where they recorded that first Damned 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 album, they didn't even record it in the main studio. They recorded it in the demo studio in practically a closet. They couldn't even all fit in the same room. And Dave, the singer, he had to go, because there was so much bleed, he had to go behind a door in the same room and kind of close the door on himself. Picture this, one of the greatest punk singles of all time, one of the great punk records of all time, was on an indie label, and they couldn't fit in the room. They were recording over somebody else's demos. There's like this folk song that's on the tape, and then between songs they say, I could hear this other band playing, and it wasn't them. It's because you get this crosstalk on, you know, the old reel-to-reels. They couldn't even afford their own reel-to-reel. They recorded it for 50 quid. A lot of people like me who have studied the punk era, they consider the Damned as a proper punk band. Members of the Clash were in the Damned, you know, before they got signed and everything, and they got kicked out for not being fast and raucous enough, you know, because Scabies, the drummer, Brian, and Captain Sensible and Vanyan, that is, you know, the original lineup, and they only lasted 2 albums. Second album was too rushed. They had this huge hit with the first one. Well, it wasn't a huge hit, it was a relative hit for an indie label, you know, one of the first indie labels. And Scabies got his name because when they first came down, you know, jam with Brian and the rest, he literally turned up scratching. He said, why are you scratching? He says, oh, I got scabies. So the guy whose drum kit it was that he was going to practice on put a newspaper on the seat and everything. And they saw a rat in the same place, you know, total glamour. And so that's how he got his nickname, Scabies. He's from the early sessions that they had with the pre-Damned. I think they were called something else back then. It's amazing. And you know, while the big, like the Sex Pistols at the time, they were holding out for that big deal, for the big money deal and the rest of it, and the Damned were just doing it. They weren't overtly political. Their lyrics weren't overtly political. They were more anarchists than the actual punk bands who were at the Clash trying to get the good deals. You know, they were just going out and doing it. They beat everybody to the punch. And that's why I consider Damned to be the greatest punk band. Even though they go into goth, they go into radio rock. Captain Sensible has had some of the poppiest hits you've ever heard in your life, like Happy Talk and things like that. So let's talk more about High Watt. So with High Watt, like I say, it came out of the minds who were heavily involved with Sound City. And a lot of Sound City amps are still floating around too. But what was so special about High Watts? They had, I believe as well, the guys that used to work with Mullard. So Mullard, you know, the vacuum tubes, they call them valves in the UK, the components, they were all military spec. And so when you have military spec inside amplifiers, you really have something that's good quality. And they used to have Partridge transformers, you know, try finding some of those now, those original transformers, they will cost you an arm and a leg. I honestly thought that it was a neck pickup with the High Watt and with a treble booster. But then I was doing other research. I've asked all the band, you know, for information. None of them got back to me, which is, you know, that's the norm. But with Brian, he said that he always hated a treble booster. One guy said, I can get you that if you want. They were watching Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd were nowhere near the stage. And some guy said, I can get you that for a beer. So Brian bought this guy a pint of lager, and he went up there and nicked one of the early treble boosters off the stage and gave it to him. But he never liked it. He actually pulled it apart and he saw the name Dan Armstrong in the middle of it, inside of it, you know, handmade. That'd be worth a fucking fortune right now. That bit of history off the stage. If only he still had it. I bet he's still kicking himself that he doesn't have it. So that was what made me think that the first Damned album wasn't a treble boost into the amp, because you know, he didn't actually like them at the time. Or the only information I could find out with him and treble boost were that he didn't like them. So I think it was just straight up amp cable, curly cable into the high watt, into the, coming out of the fan speakers, and then you get that noise. And now on to the Captain. What did I use for the bass? So what I used was a short. I made sure that I used a vintage short scale bass. Now I have seen pictures of Captain with a Music Master in the back in that era. So he very well might have used it. He's also used things like violin basses, and I've seen him use all sorts of weird basses. There's the bass that he's actually got on the cover of New Rose, which he's holding, the Burns bass, you know, his bass. It's got his name on it. I don't even know what it is because I couldn't find any information on it. But basically, I think it's a short scale bass into the high watt. So that's what I did essentially, and it sounds great. I love this thing, man. This is the oldest guitar I have. 50s, baby. Yeah, but I think honestly, Captain, him moving to guitar, I don't think it was the best idea they ever had. But then again, they had hits afterwards. But I think that Captain Sensible is selling himself short by playing guitar, because it's inspirational. Listen to the bass on the Damned album. It's inspirational. It's just fucking full on. Because when you can only contain yourself with his musical expression, they're such underrated musicians, especially Rat Scabies. Come on, the drumming was fucking amazing. And that's the thing about the Damned. Even though, you know, they say punk is supposed to be brash and all the rest of it, it was all of those things. You know, you look at Kurt Cobain throwing himself into drum kits and doing all that. Who do you think he learned that from? You know, it's from the old school, the Iggy Pops, the Damned. The Damned were, think of how your band's finally going to be on TV, right? And then you have Captain Sensible fucking leaning into the drum kit on their live. Back then, you only had live TV. You couldn't, like, they hardly ever recorded anything for posterity. So then you'd have Captain Sensible like almost ruining everything every time because he was the chaos. They say that the Damned are cursed, right? Because they never got the financial gains, they never got the big contracts, they never could ever get along well. And the funny thing is, with David and Captain Sensible were doing some interview, I watched thousands of hours of this shit, and they start talking about the curse of the Damned, and David kind of like pointed to Captain Sensible, just a little tiny little thing like that, and it was very subtle. So, you know, maybe the curse is Captain Sensible because he's at the center of every fucking controversy that the band have had. But that's it. Captain is an absurdist. He's a punk. He's a catalyst. He's everything. He's so fucking out there and insane that. And then you have David, who is just a grave digger at 17 years old and obsessed with vampires. And he only got the job in the Damned because he looked like a fucking vampire. He didn't even sing. He just kind of lied that he sang. And then who knew that he had the lungs for Eloise and things like that, you know? So the second Damned album, that was kind of rushed. You know, they got the hit and then they had to move on and I think they literally gave them 2 days to actually write the album, and they went in and it didn't do great. And the first iteration of the Damned actually broke up after Rat Scabies got into a fight in a hotel, and he was actually getting his ass kicked. He's getting like badly beaten, and he saw the rest of the band kind of watching on and didn't help him out, and he thought, like, that isn't the gang mentality that I signed up for, you know, he's supposed to help me and things like that. So he left, and then because he left, Brian and Rat, they were the main instigators of the first album. They were the backbone really of the band. And so when Rat left, Brian just had to follow straight soon afterwards. You know, he wasn't feeling it anymore because he wanted that raucous. You can't get more raucous than Rat Scabies drumming. It's insane. Yeah, and the second album wasn't a huge success, but the third one, which was kind of it's a weird one because, you know, we Smash It Up and the rest of it. There's a lot of poppy aspects in there, and that's really where Captain Sensible shines. He has a very good ear for pop music, for anything that's catchy. Captain Sensible was the first white rapper in the UK to have a rap hit. I think it's Say What or something. Say Captain, I say what. It's so funny. See, he was into everything. With the third album, that was actually a Mesa Boogie. Remember the old Mesa Boogie combos with the wicker fronts on them and that type of thing? So that was actually the amp that was on that album. He actually stole that amp, that Mesa Boogie combo, from Mick Ronson. Yeah, the Mick Ronson. Spiders from Mars. There's a fucking tone I've tried to get in the past and talk about failure. If any of you knew what Mick Ronson used on Ziggy Stardust, let me know, because I really want to do that one. I think it would be great tribute to the late great man. So yeah, I have a long list of gear that Captain Sensible has used on the guitars in the past and the bass in the past. So check out the description for that, because he's used everything from cricket bats with pickups on them to all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of too much to get into here. But he's used Mesa Triaxis. He's used the pods. He's used the beams, the old beam pods. And I think that's part of the reason why I never got on with his guitar playing. It wasn't so much the riffs. I think it was a part of the production and part of the actual gear that he was using at the time. I don't think he had that. I don't think he had the magic in line when it came to his actual guitar parts. Because even though some of the guitars do sound good, it just didn't have the visceral effect from the first album. Or even when they were doing mellow, it was always kind of that solid state thing going on. Because I imagine I've seen them push over more amps than you've had hot dinners, and when you're dealing with valves and tubes and more delicate electronics of a tube amp, you know, you want solid state. I wish you'd go back to bass and get in a guitarist who was, you know, more. It's hard. I don't think he's ever replaced. There's been like a lot of Welshmen. Hey, maybe I could be the next guitarist in the Damned. There's been a lot of Welshmen in the band, in and out. So that's it. And thanks to my patrons of Tone. You guys are awesome. I haven't had any sign-ups recently, but Richard P and Co. You guys are the best. Really appreciate it. And you got to help me out. Look at this. I said once I'd get 100 patrons, I'd start cutting my strings. It's getting really bad. You guys have to sign up to Patreon to save me from myself, because the amount of eyes this is potentially taken out. I'm not an expert. You know, before I'd take it on, take it off. Now I'm always wary of the fact that Stringgate is going too slowly. Nobody's signing up. Nobody's watching my videos. My videos are like fucking tanked. So yeah, what about a guitar for Goth Broth? Because if you can see in the back of this, on the headstock, you might be able to see a face there. He's the original Gibson guy. So this is actually called a Gothic SG. So a Gothic SG for Goth Broth. And why not? So if you guys know exactly what they used in that first album, because, you know, I might be wrong. It might have been a Marshall. Because I was zooming in on their early gigs. You know, the gigs around that period in the late 70s when they recorded. And it would be the high watt, and then I'd see a little Marshall in the corner. I would go, it's a Marshall, but it was never plugged into the Marshall. They were always plugged into the high watts. So I was like, And then I was like, I have some Marshalls on stage, but that was their American tour, so that was the American backline. So yeah, I've spent probably an hour looking over all video footage, trying to see which direction the switch is in. Was it the neck pickup, or was it the bridge pickup? And I couldn't find it. So every time I get a close up of the guitar, his hand will be in the way. I'd be, fuck! Oh, that sound? You don't like that sound? It's all I've been hearing for the past 2 fucking years. Alright, chaps. So, coming up soon is the continuation of Goth Broth during Halloween. And up next is Killing Joke. Yep. Tune in next time, and I'll see you then. Circle of Tone.